Now from WATN, it's Local 24 This Week with Richard Ransom.
Welcome to Local 24 This Week. Hope you're having a great weekend. We're here every Sunday at 9 a.m. and 10:35 p.m. to give you the real story behind the big stories. And did we ever have some big stories this week? Let's take a look. First up, the politics of a wise man. The U of M star basketball recruit finds himself in the middle of a national story after the NCAA questions his eligibility. Politicians on both sides of the aisle rush to be on James Wiseman's side. Runoff results, 2 Memphis City Council seats are decided in runoff elections this week, and in each case, the incumbent was booted out. I'll ask my panel what the results really mean. And decree decision. A federal judge denies a request by Memphis and its police department to modify a 40-year-old consent decree restricting how it monitors citizens. Was it the right decision? We'll get to all of that, but first our one-on-one segment, and I'm happy to have with us someone who has covered every breaking detail in the James Wiseman story. Gary Parrish, he is here with the ESPN 92.9 FM.
Good to be here.
Thank you, sir, for coming along and talking on the show. So where do things stand right now? We should point out we record this on a Friday afternoon, and we understand things may develop between now and when the show airs, but what are you hearing may happen?
Well, obviously on Thursday morning, James Wiseman withdrew his lawsuit against the NCAA in Memphis, at which point Memphis ruled him ineligible and applied for reinstatement, which is the way almost every university would handle that situation. It just took Memphis a week to get to that point. So now they are waiting for the NCAA to render its punishment, for lack of a better word, and that'll include some amount of games, presumably, possibly something that forces Memphis to vacate the first 2 wins of the season when James Wiseman played, and then there would probably be a charitable donation to match the money that is, for the purpose of this story, qualifies as the impermissible benefit. What that's going to look like is still unclear, but I think if I were a Memphis fan, I would expect something like a 5-game suspension.
So will he play by the time they play Tennessee?
That's what everyone's doing. I would, if I had to guess, I would say yes, but it's not clear.
Okay.
But something around a 5-game suspension seems reasonable, all things considered at this point, and that would obviously have him in the building and in uniform and on the court in Knoxville.
Your thoughts on how Memphis and Wiseman handled this whole thing initially, all the publicity. I mean, I was struck by just the national interest that this story got.
Yeah, it's been fascinating to watch because there's a different time when, if the same story goes down, Memphis would be getting killed nationally for, and this isn't my opinion, but I'm just telling you what people would say. That's a program that's already had to vacate 2 Final Fours in its history. They went out and hired a quote-unquote AAU coach. He got the #1 player in the country, bought and paid for. Go get him NCAA. But there's such an anti-NCAA sentiment right now across this country that it's almost like the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Everybody hates the NCAA, so they're backing largely the University of Memphis, whether it's LeBron James or Stephen A. Smith or the Washington Post even. It's been remarkable to watch that develop the way it did. And I think you can argue that James filing the lawsuit and Memphis at least initially fighting did lead them to this place where they're at right now and maybe helped them get there where they will benefit in ways that they otherwise wouldn't. But either way, they needed to get to this place. Fighting long term. I know that there's a sentiment in Memphis, a fighter's mentality. Let's not let them do this to us again. But I'm just telling you, anybody who understands how NCAA cases normally work, it would have been unwise because you might have won, but nobody I know thinks you would have. And ultimately, you would have put an NCAA cloud of your program for years, which would have made recruiting more difficult. And then at the end of the day, you probably lose. A court somewhere would eventually rule the NCAA is a voluntary organization. Nobody makes a university be a member. Nobody makes an individual go to a member school. Once you go, by extension, you agree to play by their rules.
You're signing up for it.
You're signing up for it. And they are going to allow the NCAA to enforce the rules. When that happens, what would have happened, again, presumably, but probably, a notice of allegations arrives. They charge Memphis with knowingly using an ineligible player, level 1 violation, and any number of punishments could be on the table. Future postseason bans, recruiting restrictions, scholarship reductions, monetary fines, a suspension of Penny Hardaway. You just don't want to deal with that very likely possibility. If option A is have this all over by middle of December and move on, or option B is have that cloud hang over you for years and then get whacked pretty good, you take option A every time.
this may not be a landmark legal case, what's transpired over the past week, but is it a landmark case, do you think? Every other NCAA school is watching what happened and how things unfolded. Do you think down the road that Memphis and its decision to handle this the way it did will be seriously considered by any other school that comes up with a similar situation?
Well, I will say on a lesser level, one of the other controversies that the NCAA deals with constantly is transfer waivers. Sometimes when a student athlete transfers, the NCAA says you can play immediately. Other times they say you have to sit out a year. Memphis is actually waiting on an announcement connected to Isaiah Stokes, same type of deal. Well, what pattern has developed here is if you lawyer up and threaten to fight, they have often just said, take the waiver, we don't want to deal with it. So perhaps that is ultimately the message here, the lesson that can be learned. Memphis backed off of its fight, so did James Wiseman. Everybody's playing nice now. But initially, James took this into the court. Memphis played James Wiseman in defiance of the NCAA, and if Memphis gets a favorable punishment, something better than what you assume it would have gotten if it would have just set him out from the first game and did as the NCAA told it, then you can reasonably argue that Memphis standing up the way it did initially helped Memphis get a lighter punishment. But I think ultimately we've got to wait to see what that punishment looks like. If it's what I've described, it could lead to other schools saying, let's fight or at least threaten to fight like Memphis did. It worked there. But if the punishment is excessive, it might be the opposite message, which is, don't do what Memphis did because they got hit pretty good.
They really paid for it. All right, it's going to be interesting to watch. And you think we'll have a resolution very soon?
I think it could be soon and probably will be soon. But I will say, as long as everybody can agree, and I think most people do, this is not going to be a one-game suspension or a two-game suspension. I think 3 is the absolute minimum. You just look at the schedule. There's no urgency to get it done today, tomorrow. You just got to get it done within the time range of whatever that punishment is going to be. Because regardless of when the announcement comes, James Wiseman did not play against Alcorn State. He'll get, it's time served. He'll get credit for missing that game. So I know everybody wants to find out as soon as possible, Penny Hardaway included, but there is really no necessary rush to it.
All right, well, given the body language of President Rudd and Penny Hardaway today, you get the feeling that they're fairly confident it's going to be all right.
I think before James Wiseman withdrew his lawsuit and before Memphis ruled him ineligible and applied for reinstatement, they had a pretty good idea, or at least they believed they had a pretty good idea of what the punishment would look like. I don't think they do that blindly.
Will you stick around for one more segment? I want you to join us over at the round table. We want to talk about this a little bit more, and we'll be back with that right after this.
I did some early shopping this year. One for you, one for me.
I love it. I got us a little something too.
Yeah?
Yep. One for you and one for me.
I love it.
Oh, actually, that was supposed to be for me.
I love it.
I like bread.
Step up to GMC and get over $9,200 total value on this next generation Sierra Denali. Or current eligible GM owners get over $10,200.
See your Mid-South GMC dealers.
Everyone who has ever lived has lived here. All of mankind's triumphs and failures. Every moment, every hometown, all here. We start our coverage on the ground and take it to the airwaves, so you always know what's happening in your own world and beyond. We are free TV and radio. We are breaking news. We are always there. We are broadcasters.
I love that one.
I love it.
I love it.
It's easy to fall in love with a new Chevy.
I love this one too.
And this month is the perfect time to see why.
Wow.
I love it.
That's my next truck.
Find your reason to fall in love with a new Chevy and get a great deal all month long.
I love it.
I'm gonna go buy a Chevy.
Right now, during the Black Friday sales event, get 20% below MSRP on select 2019 models, or get 15% below MSRP on most 2020 Equinox models. See your Mid-South Chevy dealers.
Memphis is a hub for blues, barbecue, and FedEx, but it's also a hub for one threat that puts you at risk every time you fly.
Declaring an emergency.
Every year, hundreds of birds and wildlife strike airplanes, causing damage, grounding our flights, and threatening your safety. Good Day Memphis anchor John Paul investigates what steps experts are taking to keep your flight in the air. Unfriendly Skies, Monday at 10, only on Local 24 News. You're watching Local 24 This Week with Richard Ransom.
Back with Gary, and now my roundtable to talk about the James Wiseman story a little bit more. Reverend Ken Whalen with New Olivet Worship Center is here, as is Otis Sanford with Local 24, political analyst. So there's a political side to this, and there's also a racial component to all of this. And you were talking about it on the radio, I heard, Reverend Ken. Discuss this a little bit.
Well, there is, if it's not unspoken, it's close to unspoken, this notion that the NCAA, especially with this California legislation, treats athletes like chattel. It's a plantation mentality. It's a racist ideology, as far as I'm concerned, where more and more these days there's a groundswell of intent among the people to say, NCAA, you need to do right by athletes. And I think it's valid.
You see that too, Gary, in your reporting?
There's no question. I mean, I've been writing columns for years, talking about it for years. I fundamentally believe, like as in the James Wiseman case, there are rules. As long as they're in place, even if I disagree with them, you have to follow them, or you get caught, you get punished. But put me in charge, I change all the rules tomorrow, because it is an outdated system. The concept of strict amateurism. The bill in California is designed to not guarantee student athletes get anything, just allow them the opportunity to get whatever somebody wants to give them.
Right.
The NCAA has consistently argued that they're scholarship athletes and therefore they need to be prohibited from accepting all of these things. Well, I was a scholarship student as well, not for sports, obviously, but for journalism.
Right.
And while I was on scholarship at the University of Memphis, completing my degree, I could also get the commercial appeal to pay me to work for them at the same time. And nobody thought that was wrong. It was celebrated. Good job, Gary. And the idea that student athletes are held to a different standard, it has always been unfair, and now finally lawmakers are starting to take note of it.
It's a good analogy, Otis.
Right. It's a real good analogy, and obviously I have to say, in the interest of full disclosure, I'm a full-time employee at the University of Memphis, so I come at this with a little.
So you bleed blue, we understand.
I definitely bleed blue, because you know, that's my employer. Right. But having said that, I think the big point here, there is a perception out there, whether it's real or not, that the NCAA plays favorites with certain schools. And some of that is even based on the race that you were talking about here. There's this perception, whether it's true or not, that Penny Hardaway is being punished because he had the audacity to go after these big players, especially Wiseman, when other people like a Calipari or a Roy Williams, with all of the cheating scandal that was going on in North Carolina, and they sort of turned a blind eye to some of that. That's just a perception out there. So this is more about who's winning the PR here. And I agree with everything that you said in the first segment, Gary, about this. But that PR component is that the NCAA is getting a bad rap now, and a lot of it is deserved by a lot of the media that's national.
And I would add this. Earlier, I spent a lot of time explaining why it was in Memphis' best interest to get this resolved, James Wiseman's best interest to get this resolved. Also, for the reasons you just noted, in the NCAA's best interest to get this resolved, because they can be on the right side of their rule book, but still on the wrong side of public opinion.
You wonder how much they are aware of where they stand with the public. They got a wake-up call this week, for sure.
It's a billion-dollar institution that has a terrible public relations department.
Well, part of my insight into it also is that I think this was a perfect storm for that lawsuit. I personally wish that James had not withdrawn it, because it would have forced the issue all the way to its zenith, because somebody would have to make a determination about what is the standard. What's the standard? As Otis referred to, why does it keep moving and shifting? Well, Penny is not afraid of the NCAA. He doesn't need it. And you can tell in his body language. You could tell right after when they asked him about James playing, he said, oh, he's going to play. That's a baller's kind of unintimidated mentality.
But they also, very briefly here, filing the lawsuit sent a message to the NCAA that they are willing to fight.
Right.
And then pulling back on it gives them room now to say, well, let's see if we can resolve this. You agree with that, Gary?
It was the brilliant thing about filing the lawsuit, if we can agree that it led to this, because it created something that Memphis, or James specifically, could then take back.
That's right.
Like, okay, hey, we're going at you. We'll take it back. Now you give us a little bit as well, because you guys understand lawsuits better than I. just because you withdraw a lawsuit doesn't mean you can't refile it.
That's exactly right.
If you do not get a favorable,
also doesn't mean that some other athlete won't file a lawsuit as well, because as I said in my commentary, man, the notion of depriving somebody of due process, that's a valuable thing, and it is protected by the Constitution. I think somebody else might file a lawsuit.
All right, we're a political show too. I got to ask you about this. You had Steve Cohen wasted no time coming out condemning what happened. David Kostoff, same thing. Couldn't agree with Cohen on anything, but they agreed on that. And he even wants an investigation into the NCAA. And then at the state level, Antonio Parkinson and Brian Kelsey joining forces to pass state legislation that would supersede some of the NCAA.
Two Republicans, two Democrats here.
Yep.
When does that happen lately that they were agreeing on anything? They are just getting involved in something that they know is very, very
Is it just opportunism, or do you think they have legitimate?
Well, there's a little bit of opportunism here, but I think there's a righteous cause here. Because, again, everybody needs to try to expose the NCAA for what it really is and try to force some changes here. And these legislators and lawmakers are trying to get in on that scope.
I've got 30 seconds left. So
Republicans and Democrats, this is something everybody agrees on, that the NCAA is fundamentally a wrong organization. And so if you find an issue that you can score political points with and then also be on the right side of history, this is a very easy political issue for everybody.
What's your take, Reverend Ken?
Well, again, I hope somebody else files a lawsuit, because I think the issues are much, much deeper than just what happens on the basketball court.
Okay, very good. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to let Gary go back to do his radio show. And we're going to take on a couple of other issues, including the big runoff in the Memphis City Council right after this.
I'm Local 24 meteorologist Chelsea Chandler. Before you get your kids ready for school each day, make sure you catch my bus stop forecast so they're prepared throughout the day. It's weekdays on Good Day Memphis, 5 to 7.
The bus stop forecast on Good Day Memphis is brought to you by NST.
I'm Craig Morgan. As a former first responder, I know seconds matter when firefighters need fast, controlled access. Knox products have been trusted since 1975. Now, Knox introduces the eKey, a new technology that offers you the same secured access to your vital assets at your business, even secure home delivery. With 24/7 functionality, the Knox Connect eKey is your solution. I depend on Knox for my business, and now you can too. Visit Knox.com to learn more.
Cigna knows you're more than just a number. That's why Cigna Medicare Advantage treats you like a whole person, body and mind, for a cost that makes sense for you. Start enjoying more coverage for less. Call 1-855-552-0688. With Cigna, you get medical, dental, vision, and prescriptions in one plan. A team of doctors for your overall health, and healthy living programs to save you money. Plus, no monthly premium and only a $5 specialist copay. Medicare annual enrollment is now. Make sure you have the right plan for the right price. Call now to get your free Medicare Advantage guide and learn how to get a complete plan that fits your budget. Call 1-855-552-0688. That's 1-855-552-0688. Or visit GetCignaMedicare.com. Cigna, together all the way.
Oh, Heavenly Hand Cream.
Heavenly Hand Cream? My hands get so dry and cracked, I need serious relief. That's why I use O'Keeffe's Working Hands. It's America's #1 selling hand cream for guaranteed relief of dry, cracked hands. Thanks to O'Keeffe's, I got my hands back.
Two other big stories to talk about this week, one of them being the city council runoff elections. Turnout was miserable. We knew it would be. But the results were interesting to me because you have incumbents booted, and that doesn't traditionally happen, number one, especially in the case of District 7, if we can throw up those results. District 7 was Berlin Boyd, who was council chairman for 2 years, ousted by Michael Easter Thomas, and she won by a lot. Let's put it there. 75-25 roughly was the margin there. Otis, what's your take on that?
Well, first let's talk briefly about that turnout. Yes, it was just under 5%, which is pretty dismal, but it's what I expected. But there's no indication to believe that the results would have been different if it had been 45%. Michael and Easter Thomas took advantage of the huge unpopularity of Berlin Boyd. People were out to get him, politically speaking, and they were not going to be satisfied until he was defeated. And a lot of that was self-inflicted. things that he did on the council when he was chair of the council. Didn't help that he, told somebody your mama on in a council meeting. And there were other issues related to him. This was a stunning defeat for him, and I think it hurts and probably ruins his political career going forward.
Wow.
I don't disagree with that, and it's that and the fact that Miss Easter Thomas is a very impressive person. She has the wherewithal, she has the experience as an educator. She did a great job, ran a great campaign, and she had all these other people who were against Berlin to support her. You can't lose with that.
No, you can't. Now, granted, he had that one outburst you mentioned on the city council and maybe a couple of others over the course of his tenure. Drew some controversy, but, Reverend Ken here can tell you, you can say some things that are controversial, and sometimes it endears people to you. So explain what was it about
this one was different, Richard. I mean, we're talking about it. There was already some heated stuff that was going on in the council at that time. Remember, the council was already in a bad way because they could not agree on filling those council seats, and they refused to give that District 1, which we're going to talk about in a second, to Rhonda Logan, and that's where all of this started. And he and Boyd just did not act as a professional. He should have taken the high road when people were upset.
Well, you can't forget that these political seats belong to the people.
Right.
And when you use them to castigate people or embarrass people or make people feel bad, they never forget that. And because it's an abuse of power, that's all it is. It's an abuse of power.
That's exactly right.
Well, now we have a District 1 seat that is going to be filled, hopefully for a prolonged period of time. Sherman Greer and Rhonda Logan up against each other in that runoff, and Sherman had been appointed. Rhonda Logan wanted to be appointed back when that controversy was brewing, and now she's got the seat for 4 years.
Well, and again, it just shows that I think that vote was a total repudiation of the city council.
And the process.
Because they refused to even consider her. Some of that was because of some of the people who were supporting her at the time. But again, she was the people's choice out there. And Sherman Greer, unfortunately for him, he became the compromise candidate here. But clearly, the community was supporting Rhonda Logan. She ran a good race as well.
Well, speaking of things that most people can't say, man, the deal to appoint people, replacements to city council and county commission and other local bodies is straight gutter politics, man. It's deal making of the worst order. There's nothing wrong with making deals, but I'm telling you from personal experience, Richard, it is disgusting the way deals are cut behind closed doors.
Well, they were going to appoint somebody from down in Mississippi.
And I think this particular outcome is an encouragement to other people who might be interested in running or interested in being appointed. Don't be discouraged if they don't appoint you. Come back later and run for the position and win the position.
That's exactly.
What does this, the new leadership of the city council, and there's some other changes from the original election in October, surmise your view of the new city council. What does this mean for Memphis, and what can we expect from them as a legislative body?
Well, the number one thing that we're going to see a lot more women on the council.
Two women now,
and more black women on the council. I think that's going to change the tone and tenor. I think there's an empowerment movement here. It's been going on for a while. You're going to see that on the city council. A lot of the old heads are gone now. So you're going to see a different tone. You're going to see a different focus. I just think that that's the number one thing that I see going forward.
Well, the other side of that is I see a possibility, especially with Miss Easter Thomas. Ms. Logan is a daughter of a well-known pastor here with education in her background. I think we might be seeing a city council that is leaning toward being more supportive of public education. I think that's what we might be seeing.
Hopefully speaking.
Hopefully speaking. All right, we got 2.5 minutes left.
Okay.
I don't want to give too short shrift to the decision by Judge John McCalla, a federal judge, who had the appeal of the city, and the Memphis police were appealing to him, I should say, to at least make some changes to this decree, this consent decree that we've talked about so much, resulting from the Memphis Police Department and its surveillance techniques. He basically said, No, well, I don't care what you have to say here. Even though the city tried to make this case that, oh, we're not going to be able to talk to the FBI if you follow this strictly. We're not going to be able to talk to the Shelby County Sheriff's Department. We're going to have to give up the Crime Stoppers program. It got a little ridiculous.
There's a southern word for all of that, Richard, and it's called hogwash. And that's what this was. I think that Judge McCollum made the absolute right decision here. Anybody who can read should read the 78 consent decree. It says nothing about criminal investigations. Police are free to do criminal investigations all the time. Even if they get information that somebody's plotting something that's criminal, they have the right to investigate and even do undercover if they can for criminal matters. This consent decree has to do with political surveillance, has to do with spying on protest groups and other activists. That's all we're talking about. Is it fair, though, when other cities don't have the consent decree to worry about, for the city of Memphis to have to abide by something that's 40 years old?
Well, Memphis is not like other cities. We have a very unique history in terms of civil rights, that kind of thing. But let me say this, man. And heavy-handed policing. Well, absolutely. But let me say this. In the case of the consent decree and Judge McCollum's ruling, I'm not surprised at it because he has a reputation as a very, very well-thought-out, balanced judicial leader. But I will say that everybody knows that the legal argument that the city attorneys made they were massaging Jim Strickland's political argument and his position at the time. It's a very dangerous thing when you have to go into court and make a legal argument from what your political boss said. And that's exactly what happened. I think if you read Judge McCollum's order, you'll see that between the lines.
Okay, very good. We're going to have to leave it there. Thanks, you two, for being here. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back to wrap things up.
It's all-wheel drive season.
And nobody has more all-wheel or four-wheel drive vehicles than Toyota. Because when snow, wind, and rain hit, you gotta be ready.
And Toyota SUVs have been proving themselves for over 50 years.
Now you can get $1,250 cash back on the adventurous new 2019 RAV4.
Or you can lease this all-wheel drive RAV4 now for just $219 a month.
Toyota all-wheel drive season.
Get ready for everything.
Toyota, let's go places.
The world is changing at a rate like never before. So, why isn't education? Raise your hand if you could use an education that's actually modern, actually affordable, and actually personal. If you're one of the 35 million Americans who hasn't finished your degree, well, Strayer's here to help. New bachelor students can even receive a brand new laptop.
You need a winner to maximize how much money you'll get from your case.
It's easy with Monteezy. A texting driver hit my car from behind. I was knocked out cold, and when I woke up, my husband had already called Mike Monteezy. Monteezy's law firm was impressive. They put a strong team to work on my case. It's easy with Monteezy. We didn't even go to trial, and Mike got me more than I wanted. So now with Mike Monteezy's help, our future is secure. Call 526-2126.
Face it, your 9 p.m. routine could use a little excitement. Wake 'em up. ABC's got you covered with groundbreaking, award-winning dramas. Cool.
Something big, I feel it happening. Oh, whoa, whoa, something big, I feel it happening.
This is exactly where you want to be. So grab the remote and kick back. Why end the night when 9 p.m. is when awesome begins?
Then watch Local 24 News at 10.
We'd like to hear what you have to say about today's show. rransom@localmemphis.com is the email address. rransom@localmemphis.com. Again, my thanks to Otis and to Reverend Ken and to Gary Parrish, who was on earlier. And we'll see you next time for Local 24 this week.